Okay, welcome again, students. Today's topic, we're still on fractions, but today we're going to be looking at multiplying and dividing fractions. How do we multiply fractions? How do we divide fractions? So let's start with multiplication of fractions. Okay, so here's our first example. 1/2 times 1/3. Now with multiplication, we simply multiply the numerators, the numbers at the top, and then we multiply the denominators, the numbers at the bottom. So 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 3 is 6. Okay? When we do addition and subtraction of fractions, we have to make sure that the denominators are the same before we add or subtract fractions. But with multiplication and later when we get to division, the denominators do not have to be the same. Alright, let's work another example. 5/6 times 2/7. Again, we simply multiply the numerators. 5 times 2 is 10, and then 6 times 7 is 42. Okay? We can always simplify if needs be, right? But the main point for today is knowing that we multiply the numerators and then we multiply the denominators. Alright, so let's try another example, this time when we have mixed numbers. Remember in our previous lesson we had learned how to change from mixed numbers to improper fractions. So let's see how we are able to complete this question. Alright, so 1/3/4 times 5.5. Okay, so we have mixed numbers. Before we start our multiplication, we need to change these mixed numbers to improper fractions. And if you forgot how to do that, alright, let's go ahead. We multiply our denominator by the whole number and then we add our numerator. So 4 times 1 is 4. 4 plus 3 is 7. That goes over the denominator. And then we do the same thing with our second fraction. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 plus 1 is 11. And that goes over our denominator, which is 2. So now we have our fractions. And as we said, when we are multiplying fractions, we simply multiply across, meaning we multiply both numerators and then we multiply both denominators. So 7 times 11 is 77, and then 4 times 2 is 8. Of course, like I said, we can simplify, but I'll leave that for another video in terms of how to simplify these. Meaning we're going to change the improper fraction back to a mixed number. Okay? Alright, so here's another example with a mixed fraction. 3.5, and let's use an improper fraction this time. 7/8. Okay? So in this case, we will only need to change one of our fractions. Okay? So we're going to change the mixed number because the other one is already in the correct format. So again, 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. 7/2 times, again, we write this back as it is. Didn't need to change it, right? So now we say 7 times 7. 7 sevens, 49. And 2 times 8 is 16. Okay? As I said, it's in the improper fraction format, and we can change it to our mixed number, right? But as I said, we'll take that up in another session. So just to recap quickly, when we are multiplying fractions, we simply need to multiply the numerators and then multiply the denominators. If we have mixed numbers, it's best if we change these mixed numbers to improper fractions first, and then we multiply as usual, multiplying the numerators and then multiplying the denominators. Okay, so now we are going to get into dividing fractions, okay? So again, we have our fractions on the board. If you notice, there's a division sign in the middle, so it's a half divided by 1/3. How do we go about dividing these fractions? The first thing we have to do is we write back the first fraction that doesn't change, then we change the sign to multiplication, and because we're changing the sign to multiplication, meaning we're doing the opposite of division, we also have to change the second fraction. There's a term that we use, we find the reciprocal, meaning which basically means that we're going to flip the fraction, right? We're going to make it the opposite of what it was. So now the 3, which is the original denominator, now becomes the numerator, and then the numerator becomes the denominator. Okay? So we write back the first fraction as it was, we change the sign, and then we flip. Okay? So now we already know how to multiply, so we just simply multiply our numerators and then our denominators. So 1 times 3 is 3 over 2 times 1 is 2. Again, in the interest of time, I don't want the videos to be too long. Of course, we already did changing from improper fractions to mixed numbers. You can go back to that video. And we also did changing from mixed numbers to improper fractions. So you can go back to that video to see how we can simplify our answers. So the next example here, again, 5/6 divided by 2/3. What we need to do is write back the the first fraction stays as is. We change the sign to multiplication and then we flip. We find the reciprocal of this fraction. Means we basically flip it upside down. So the 3 goes on top and the 2 goes at the bottom, and then we simply multiply. 5 times 3 is 15 and 6 times 2 is 12. And that's what division of fraction is. Now let's go to our examples where we have mixed numbers. The first thing we have to do is change our mixed numbers improper fraction. That makes it much easier for us to work with. So 3 times 2 is 6. 6 plus 1 is 7. So our first fraction is 7/3. Then we change the sign and then we flip or find the reciprocal of the second fraction. So the 8 goes on top and the 5 goes at the bottom. Then we multiply across as usual. 7 times 8 is 56 over 3 times 5 is 15. And of course, just a reminder that we can simplify this as well. Let's get to our final example. Okay, so first we have to change both fractions from mixed numbers to improper. 2 times 4 is 8. 8 plus 1, that's 9/2. And then we change the second one. So we're just rewriting the fraction with improper fractions instead of mixed numbers. 5 times 1 is 5 plus 3, that's 8/5. Again, we just simply rewrote the fractions with improper fractions instead of the mixed. Then, final step, we're going to write back the original fraction 9/2, and then we're now going to change the sign and find the reciprocal. So we're now going to flip the fraction, so the 5 goes on top and the 8 goes at the bottom, and then we multiply across. 9 times 5 is 45, and that goes over 2 times 8 is 16. Okay, so there you have it. Division, just to recap, we simply rewrite the first fraction we change the sign to multiplication, and then we flip the second fraction. And when we flip the second fraction, we go back to original multiplication format. The process for multiplication, we multiply the numerators and then we